King had a dream. I am the dream. Dr. King had a dream. I am the dream. Dr. King had a dream. I am the dream. Dr. King had a dream. I am the dream. Dr. King had a dream. I am the dream.
Hello, we've got day 4 of spring breakout. My name is Ty Carpenter. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the president of Don't Shoot Portland. Today is promoting a rally, and we're just excited to do another day of this. Grateful.
Yes, and I'm Teresa Rayford. I'm the founder of Don't Shoot Portland. Very happy to be here in company with all of y'all.
So, hi, everybody. My name is Tiana Arata. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an activist, an organizer, and also a student in university right now studying ethnic studies and Pan-African studies. I'm currently being criminalized for my participation in organizing a protest, and I'm facing 13 charges. So follow #FreeTiana for more updates on that. And I'm also just a nonconformist, and I'm just happy to be here and be in discussion with all these wonderful people.
Thank you so much. And Jacinda, will you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Teresa. My name is Jacinda Padilla, and I use they, them pronouns, and I am a storyteller and relational organizer currently in Portland, Oregon, and I do a lot of youth engagement as well as sharing and training folks on how important it is to share our stories and create community through our shared values and experiences. I'm really excited to be here again this week. Thank you.
And Corinne, do you mind telling us a bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Corey. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm a visual artist from Chicago, Illinois, and I am happy to be here.
And Joseph?
Yeah, hi. My name is Joseph Blake. I'm a local photographer and documenter and also in school to become a teacher. And yeah.
And Sochi, will you introduce yourself to us?
My name is Sochi, and I'm a local artist, and I'm just kind of grateful to be here to hear everyone's stories and share things.
Thank you so much. And Barack?
Hey everyone, my name is Barack. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an activist, community organizer, and abolitionist based out of Portland, Oregon. And I'm the program director for the Peacekeeper Society, which is a mutual aid nonprofit that focuses on Indigenous sovereignty and providing basic needs.
Awesome. And Samuel?
Hey everybody, happy to be here. My name is Samuel. I am a visual artist and musician, a local artist in Portland. I do a lot of work with different artist advocacy groups in the area, just looking at how artists and creators can kind of retain, own, and control 100% of the work that they do in the city. And I'm just really happy to be here and in conversation.
We appreciate you for being here as well. And we have Fingers Crossed ASL Interpretation joining us. So Andrew and Lo, if y'all don't mind introducing yourselves and talking to us a little bit about what you do and also Fingers Crossed Interpretation. Interpreting.
Hi, my name is Andrew Tolman, they, them pronouns. I'm the founder of Fingers Crossed Interpreting. We're here in Portland, Oregon, doing a lot of work like this around the community. So happy to be here for the whole week, and thank you for making this accessible.
Thank you for being here for us and teaching us how to make it accessible. And Lo?
Used to being on mute, sorry. Hi, I'm L'Oreal. I go by either, and I use they and he pronouns. I'm an interpreter with Fingers Crossed, and I'm happy to be here this week with you all.
Thank you so much.
Organizing in the community that I lived in last summer, San Luis Obispo, SLO, was actually, I think, a unique experience because we weren't met with all of the same just violence by the police as so many other cities. Like, it's a small town versus a city. Like, they hadn't even really seen protest period there before. So I mean, a lot of the tactics, like, honestly, it was only maybe 2 or 3 different groups really organizing protests and marches over the summer. But within my internal group, we would use Signal for everything, like when we're just starting to set up, and Signal is just encrypted texting, so it can't be compromised. And I don't know, we would strategize like who we need legal observers, who do we want speaking, just so much. I mean, you see as you attend protests yourselves, and I hope people listening have been to protest themselves, but if you've not, you just see all the different aspects. Like, a lot of times we would have some of our local Native groups like come in as well and perform almost ceremonies to bless us and also to honor and praise the land that has been stolen. But I think it's really important to just sorry, I'm thinking about all this right now. I'm just taking it in. But I mean, once we got our actual core group and decided, okay, this is what we want to do, this is what we want our focus of that day or that evening to be, we would then go on to, so how are we going to get people to volunteer? Who are going to be our peacekeepers at the marches? We would always make sure that we wanted to have legal observers just to make sure in case anything did go awry that we had backup, honestly, in our community. And then once we had our foundation solidified, then we would move on to, okay, how are we going to promote this? Where are we going to share this? And a lot of times I use social media, Instagram. I didn't have Facebook, but a lot of the other people in our group did use Facebook to promote. But I see now we kind of we publicized it like super publicly when I realized like a downfall in that you honestly want to have your internal group chats, even if it's like 200 people, to say, okay, this is where we're going to be this day, this is what time, because we would have a lot of counter protesters and even the police like stalking and showing up to intimidate before, through, and after, when it's like they didn't necessarily have to have all those tips.
You got your mic.
Oh. I learned a lot and definitely grew a lot in that aspect. I think this last summer has definitely changed my organizing for the rest of my life. It made me grow up, honestly, in a sense as well, like after being criminalized and realizing like, okay, like I'm more public and more visible, I have to move smarter. And Teresa, I know you feel that, especially in Portland. And you've been there forever, so.
My position in that would be, I was always looking for someone who organizes so I can kind of attend and be like show my support and document what's going on as well. And so I used Instagram a lot for that. A lot of people would message me, or I would use my pictures and like kind of promote like, hey, this is going on today, or share kind of story, like kind of use my platform to bring more people to the protest. And so, yeah, it's how I got ready for them was first I had to mentally prepare for it, because I knew that at some point that things would get kind of chaotic downtown because of the fact that police were just abusing anybody they could down there. And so definitely preparing was a huge thing. Goggles, gas mask, what is it? Kind of like a tougher jacket that I could take off or put on if I fail, or just anything. And so my position in that was really just preparing and just kind of following lead, really.
Corey, how have you been a participant in protests and promoting rallies, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say like some of my first like tangible involvement in like organizing and protests was through like infographics and posters and flyers and stuff. So I think that's one thing I'm very like, I'm very grateful to have the like artistic ability or like know how to work Adobe, because that's been something that really like happy to be a part of, whether it be like with Don't Shoot, putting together something for riot control agents, information on that, or personal protective equipment. So that's been something that I'm a part of. And I'm also like listening to what Tiana said about being cautious about like sharing too much. I think that's really an interesting way, because I think my primary like way to share things is Instagram, and like it's so public. And so I never even thought about like that there's people, that's how people are preying on your downfall, literally, and they'll be there. And so I think that's really important that we think about that. And I would definitely will looking forward.
Recently, I think it's really important that we have an action in mind. A lot of times when I show up to rallies, I actually heard this a few years ago from a professor of mine, and we were talking about the Women's March and how like every time that we were there or that people went, and there was one on PSU's campus, we all went and there were speeches, but there was no call to action. And I think that's really important to take that energy. We all show up there, right? We all take the time to have our bodies there at the rallies. And I think it's important that like, even if it's just like, hey, like we have people signing you up to vote over there, or like, hey, can you write your legislators? It doesn't have to even be something huge. But I think that that is the biggest thing, because a lot of us, you know, a lot of last summer, I just spent standing around, or when I would go out on the ground, there was this one night where all we did was hear like 3 people talk or so and just wait outside of the Justice Center. People were like poking at the doors and peeping in the windows and stuff. And I was just like, are you just waiting for them to come out and beat us? And I just really think it's important for us to, have calls to action. If we're gonna say call to action and direct action, there should be an action. In addition to that, I've experienced something recently, and it was, you know, I take full accountability for the position that I was put in, but I was put in a very dangerous position last summer and found out that my name was out there and their name wasn't, because they tagged me on my public account with my full name and information on Twitter. So I think it's really, really important, especially as a lot of us are BIPOC organizers, right? To vet the people that you are going out and doing direct actions with, or just even talking to, because you really never know, right? I've spent so much time with the people on this panel, most of the people on this panel, and I trust them because of that time and I've spent with them. I knew this person, you know, a few months, but you know, they even said something to me at one time that I had to call them in about, that after Kevin Peterson Jr. was shot and murdered by police in Clark County in Vancouver, they said that this one action in downtown Portland was for anti-capitalism. And if you wanted to support BLM, you need to go to Vancouver. And I was just like, what the fuck? Like, pardon my language, but what the actual fuck? Black Lives Matter includes anti-capitalism, anti-racism. It's everything, right? So I think it's really important to have an actual action. If you're calling people to show up, take an action. And in addition, just be really careful of who invites you out to places. And especially as BIPOC organizers, we're at risk, especially in Portland, with how many white leftists have treated us and traumatized us this past summer. So that's just my biggest advice, is just take care of yourself and protect yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, on the ground and just online.
Definitely, like, promoting a rally and like just going to a protest today is so much different than when I was growing up, because when we were in high school, when we were, 16, 17, we would go to like Mumia Abu Jamal protest in downtown Portland, and there'd be 14 people. No one had a smartphone yet. And the cops would come and just literally like, pull our goggles back, mace us in the face. But there was no one filming it. And it was just like, 14, 15 teenagers. So it's changed a lot since then. One, like just this summer, obviously the numbers were insane. Like tons of people were coming out, and that was obviously due to a lot of different circumstances. But the other thing is it's a lot more organized now. like my role this summer was more of a guardianship role, and I would be kind of doing like de-escalation stuff, both downtown and at don't shoot protests, wherever was kind of needed. And that is definitely key. Having some sort of guardianship, people who are just there to protect the protests. And that doesn't always look like armed guards. Like there's the bike block who does all nonviolent de-escalation. And generally de-escalation is the way to go. If you like roll up on somebody and beat them down, then you just have a major problem and probably some assault charges. But if you can just convince somebody, you don't want to be here, you don't want to go that route, please leave. Like these are people who are out here exercising their rights. And so that's really important, is to have some sort of like people who are dedicated to making sure that the protest is safe, staying on side streets, blocking those off, guarding from traffic. But one thing I really wanted to touch on was kind of the idea of a diversity of tactics, which is something I'm a huge advocate for. And so that looks like drawing from like a full range of tactics that lead to liberation in all of its components. So like ending white supremacy, ending capitalism, and ending the patriarchy. And we can kind of get there like by fitting the tactics to a specific situation and not by some perceived moral code of like, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, and this is how we have to act, because things are constantly changing and adapting and evolving, and we need to be like fitting that. And the other thing is that we have to like reflect the ends have to justify the means, and they reflect the means. So when people are like, yo, just burn it all down, it's like, that's great, but are we going to end up with a dictatorship after? So if we're not like actively building as we're dismantling, we could end up in a much worse situation than we started in. And when I say diversity of tactics, I mean like you need like youth marches like we were doing this summer on Juneteenth. We need like Friday for Freedom style marches. We need direct actions with, smaller direct actions. We need people burning down police stations in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Civil Rights Act, Martin Luther King was assassinated. And the day he was assassinated, that was the beginning of the Holy Week Uprising, which was riots across the country. It was the largest civil uprising since the Civil War in the United States. And it was in Baltimore, DC, New York, all over the country. Chicago had huge riots. And at the end of that Holy Week Uprising, the Civil Rights Act was passed. And so without Dr. King's organizing of like nonviolent protests, which wasn't peaceful protesting, it was nonviolent direct action. And they were very aware of what they were doing. And that sort of laid the foundation for what would become the Civil Rights Act, but it never could have passed if they hadn't been burning down buildings and using those diversity of tactics. And so we have to look at history when we're looking forward. And that just comes down to like what you were saying, like you can't tell one person how to protest. And that goes for the other side too, for like radical people shouldn't be telling liberals not to like, march across the bridge and sing Kumbaya, because if that's going to bring people out and that's going to expand who the movement is reaching, then that's important too. And some of those people inevitably who are at those peaceful marches are going to end up at the more direct actions. And then they're going to see that like that violence that everyone's talking about on the news is from the state.
Yeah.
That the police are the ones who are actually violent, and they're the ones who are putting this violence on us. Like I've been to hundreds of declared riots, and I can tell you who started every single one of those riots, and it was the police, every single time.
Yeah.
So when we let them perpetuate that myth of peaceful protesting, and it just lets them keep that monopoly of violence and keeps that state-sponsored violence pushing forward, and we have no way to combat it because we have to be peaceful. Yeah. But we're not even being violent. Burning down a police station isn't violence. A homeless guy sleeping under a bridge without a blanket, without any food, that's violence.
Thank you.
Like kids with hungry bellies, that's violence. Like a fucking $480 billion military budget, that's violence to me. Neglecting our people. So, yeah.
Yes, fight the violence, not the people.
Mm-hmm.
So Sochi, do you want to share with us how you feel about promoting a rally, what you witnessed? I know you said you haven't been a protester too much, but I know that with your art, you have created a partnership with protests, you know, because you've helped our circumstance through communication.
Yeah. You know, I had mixed feelings about some of the things that were going on down there. And Barack, I totally agree with you. Everything you said is like spot on. I also felt weird though, because when the Justice Center started on fire, my brother was in jail. He was in the building. So I think sometimes there was moments too where people forgot that there was, that there was people who didn't agree with the police in that particular moment that could have been harmed. So I had all these mixed feelings about it, but I understood. And I had so many conversations with people walking past me because, it took quite a while to finish that mural. And, a lot of the conversations that, I would end kind of, because people wanted, there was a lot of the Proud Boys down there.
Yeah.
My husband actually became like an apprentice to me, helping me down there because so many people were harassing me during the day when I was painting and coming up and saying that kind of same thing. Oh, all lives matter. And, like trying to get like in my face or, and, like this one lady was really rude to me. And I just said, you know what, she said, oh, so you're justifying violence down there? And I wasn't even protesting, number one. But two, I made like one simple fact. I was just like, if someone killed my kid, if someone killed your kid, wouldn't you burn down a building? Like if someone's hurting your family, I think so many people went to judge real quickly on what was going down at the protests. But I think also in some ways it was not beneficial when you watched. Of course, the news is going to put what they put on, but when you watch the news and you look on there, there's a bunch of white kids starting the fires. And I thought, man, that's gonna, fall back on the wrong people, like the wrong people are gonna get punished for that. When the cops are mad because their police station was burnt down, they're not gonna pull over the white kid in the car with his mom, they're gonna pull over, the black kid driving down the street. They're gonna harass the Mexican kid who was walking by the building who wasn't even protesting, right? So I just feel like, even though everything is justified because, I don't judge why people do what they do because I know myself, the amount of rage would be, immeasurable. But on the same token, I think that it's kind of like it can be a sticky situation with protesting in the way that it goes down. And I am just kind of like a firm believer that, we have to just, one, follow the right voices, and two, keep it nonviolent. Because, if your objective is to go down there and to really change the situation for Black lives, then, you got to realize that everything you do is going to affect that, those Black lives, even when they're not there, even when they're not participating. Even Teresa, I mean, like, look at how people kind of pinpointed some of the things going on down there on you when you didn't have anything to do with it.
Exactly.
It's just like a perfect example of that. But I do agree that, obviously, maybe we don't start it, but I think that we always have to just kind of be super aware consciously of what our actions do as someone who is not Black, that our actions matter every day,
Yeah, I mean, everything is, from what Brock was talking about to how the national news and the narrative that was taken in play to further an agenda in the political sphere to all the other stories. It's just like, my interactions and engagement with what was happening over this last year and just in Portland, and especially since June, was just showing up to work on building while dismantling, and in ways I could just, show up like what Joseph was saying, which is in supporting the different communities that were doing the work and needed our infrastructure set up, that needed sound systems. It was my friends and family that were out there on the front lines. These are people that I've been in community with forever. So I had to show up, and I would not ever not show up. And I think that as an artist too, it was essential to start transitioning from just showing up and like frontline atmospheres and doing things that were involved out there was also making sure that the art that was being created was being amplified. So working with different friends in the community that were consistently amplifying BIPOC voices and youth artists to really make sure that every single paintbrush, art supplies, and step that I took was strategic as well, to not get in the way of, because what I saw at a lot of these things down at the Justice Center as well was there was a lot of white people screaming really loudly, and the whole time, and this was conversations that myself and my friends were having constantly, was like, wow, like this is going to continuously be an issue. So I think, and then seeing how that rhetoric there played into the crazy ass tactics of the police and everything that they started to do and that have been doing in the city, and even seeing now in February and March that they're not attaining to or listening, and that like the Human Rights Advisory Board in Portland has been like dismantled, it doesn't exist. And like what Barack was saying, we've had like human rights violation on human rights violation on human rights violation on human rights violation in the city. And I was just like, wow, this is this needs to, number one, be painted. It needs to be, you know, my community and I started getting into the recording studio, and it was just more about securing and amplifying voices in that setting as well, and taking the protest to the microphone, and also just figuring out how to continue to build infrastructure for the art supplies for Fridays for Freedom events, whether that was just showing up and building structures or just figuring out how to crowdsource for generators. I think that, you know, in terms of thoughts and opinions on everything, at the end of the day, I don't really know much, but I know that there is a feeling and a resonance with how incredibly, you know, well executed there was from the organizers and the activists and the engagement in the city and what this community is doing. And I think that that exploitation tactic that you're talking about has seemed so prevalent in the city. And I think that it is a really, really like important step in the planning stages, especially with these protests, which is like, oh, how can one show up in a way that only contributes to, I was pretty much off social media as well. I was, you know, on Signal and just showing up every time and saying yes to figure out how to support. But how can it really support up so it's dismantling and also building community and artistic community simultaneously? And yeah, I think being downtown and doing art installations and stuff, and then experiencing what the cops were doing and how everyone was standing and they started shooting and started pepper spraying everybody, you know, it was like, once we started wearing gas masks and showing up with art supplies, it was like, okay, let's transition to painting murals and supporting mural infrastructure. And I think that, yeah, it seems, yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts on it, but I think it's this fine line of looking at how the community and city here continues to do exactly what you were talking about, Teresa, and then figuring out ways to counteract that in a way that's not involved in an inherent exploitation that exists in society.
I think what we have to do is relieve ourselves of denial and to basically say that those actions are centered in not only anti-Blackness, but they're centered in misogyny, because you do have Black people providing the support that the status quo needs, along with white people and other communities of color, against the Black voices that should be listened to, the ones that should be championed, the ones that should be carrying us towards policy and foundational change. And when you see them out there and it feels like everybody's not on the same page or everybody doesn't get along, it's because of all of those white supremacist tactics of divide and conquer. If the system that we're fighting has all of the resources and then they get to pick which people are credible enough to receive that support, that's already going to cause more trauma to those people that are affected by violence. And then that whole situation of watching community come together and literally looking for leaders outside of those people that created the platform, again, that's misogyny and anti-Blackness. It's like, we don't want to listen to them, but we got this platform now and we're going to go ahead and develop the platform the way it should be developed. You can't tell how it should be developed if you weren't in that architectural work, along with the rest of those vulnerable community members. Movements that are organized by the communities that have been deemed at risk, that are seeking liberation, we don't benefit from co-opting those movements because we already have on the record that those inequities exist. And
Right.
so we know if we say, yes, this is anti-Blackness, yes, this is for misogyny, I think that it'll help us not perform in that space again. Tiana had wanted to make some statements.
Honestly, Teresa, it's building off of what you were just saying and what I think, I'm not sure who touched on it earlier, but like we always have to redirect to Black leadership, and absolutely leadership by Black women, fat Black women, gay Black women, trans Black women, dark-skinned Black women, because like so frequently like movements are co-opted, and then people like you see a lot of white people and a lot of non-Black people taking so much space up in this movement, but not even necessarily to be helpful, but also for their own personal agenda, and sometimes it's ego as well. So I feel like, I don't know, I just find it so incredibly important to always redirect to Black women leadership, but to also, when you're doing that, to not tokenize them, because so often we get tokenized and it's just like that's defeating the whole purpose. And so just finding ways to really, because everybody has a role in the revolution, but everybody needs to know their role, and they need to study that and not overstep boundaries, because that's when spaces get messy.
Yeah, what you were saying about like the self-care and things like that, I noticed that happening a lot, like last summer, especially, like this pandering to allies and pandering to people who just feel fatigued or whatever, or they're tired of fighting. Like, we're not all tired of fighting. Like, people are dead from fighting. Like, people are, their eyes, they're blinded, they're losing limbs, like, from fighting. And there's this message of take care of yourself. Like, you can take a break, but it's like, why? It really like boiled my blood was boiling seeing that, and seeing people, again, those Instagram infographics of like, here, put a face mask on and like relax for the night. Is like, how can you relax? I just didn't get that. And then to be like seemingly frustrated because you don't know what more you can do, but you're not doing anything right now, you know.
And the thing is, they can do so much more. Like, if you do more, then I can do less. But if you're just showing up when I tell you to show up, that's not enough.
Yeah. So one thing I want to touch on about like me actually being part of like different organizations and like going down and seeing how they interact with the crowd. One thing I did notice a lot was where that Black voices were not listened to at all during the protests downtown, especially by Justice Center. I feel like once you got to Justice Center, it became like this thing where the popularity and like the whole cliques that kind of ran these certain little individual scenes down there, they were like, oh, we're doing this for you. So just kind of like step back, like we got this kind of thing, the kind of vibe. And it was like, no, like I remember at one point it was, I think it was a Black mothers. They were saying like to, I think it was to kind of, it was a quiet night, I believe it was. And people were down there still yelling. And then like, people were like, hey, Black mothers are asking you to not yell right now. Like it's a night of silence. And people were like, no, we're not going to do that. We're here for this. And like, they were just disrespecting like Black women down there. And it was just, it got to the point where I realized that Portland is just, it's a front. A lot of people are just down there to say they're down there and they can get away with the stuff they want to do, like for fun, like be down there drinking, smoking, you know, they're drinking and smoking. They're having parties down there, playing loud music. I was seeing like people in like U-Haul trucks come down there and blasting music and like dancing. And it's like, what are you dancing and celebrating for, you know? And it's like, you go by them and they're like, they disrespect you, like, oh, we can do this right now. Go over there if you don't like it. And it's like, what are you here for? I didn't understand the whole Justice Center downtown, because half the people down there were either one there for partying because it was they had nothing else to do because COVID's here, or they just wanted to like knock down the fence and like just mess with police officers on purpose. And then the people who were actually there for actually protesting were getting tear gassed. And so what was happening is like when they would do that and you get tear gas, they would throw tear gas in the front and then throw it in the back. So you'd be trapped in there, you know? And so it just felt like when you're down there, you don't have a voice when it comes to the white majority down there. And it was just, I don't know, it's a lot. And like the biggest question I kept in my mind throughout the protest was asking myself, if there was not a pandemic going on right now, how many people actually be here? You know, because they use that excuse like, oh, I have work or I have this, where it's like, we don't get to make that choice of going to work or surviving. You know what I mean? Like being Black, you don't get to make that decision. It's, you know, and so it's disheartening that a lot of people are just down there because they're bored, and it showed. And it's like, I'd hate that it became a trend because of the fact that people just used it for gain and just saying I was there, so I support you because I was there. And yeah,
It's like, where does that work? Any thoughts from anybody?
Yeah, I just wanted to like kind of bounce off what Joseph was saying. Just like all so true. And I just remember like those first nights, like late May 28th, 29th, June 1st, when they were just like tear gassing, flashbanging, and people weren't really wearing a lot of gear. And a lot of the people, like there were thousands of people out there. Like I remember the very first march from Rev Hall, a bunch of those people were just like, it was their first protest. And then they ended up across the bridge and started getting tear gas, flashbanged, and thousands of people. Like that's really dangerous. That's what the police want. They want us to trample each other, to hurt each other, and to like inflict that pain on ourselves so they don't have to. And I remember Black women, it was all women, all Black women, putting their hands on our shoulders. You're going to be okay. Walk, don't run. This is what they want. They want us to freak out. Don't panic. We're good. We got you. And just walking up and down the line, putting their hands on people's shoulders, telling them like, we're going to be all right. And as the protest continued, it's still, whether it was mutual aid, whether it was a rally, it was all Black women planning everything, making everything happen. And then once we'd show up and be there, a lot of often men would be taking credit for it and kind of just go stand in the front and start talking. Or like we saw in the very beginning, group of people like just completely co-opting the protest, literally like taking the megaphones and starting to like kneel with police and hug police. And the women who organized the event were like, what the hell's going on? Who are these people? Are they even from Portland? They're not activists we know. And why are they hugging the police when we organized this rally? And so just kind of trying to remember who the backbone of this movement is and making that space for them and giving, fighting for them to keep that role. Because yeah, like I said, like mutual aid as well, like I'm sure we've all seen it here, like the faces of a lot of these mutual aid groups are men, but it's all run by women and often Black women. And it's just a result of toxic masculinity and the patriarchy that we allow this to continue to happen, where these people get to like take all the credit and all the ego leads everything, when in reality, it's like just the extremely hard work of lots of women of color behind the scenes. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there and give respect where it's due.
I just want to add, Joseph said incredible things that I have been like thinking and feeling, but didn't necessarily like want to put it out there, specifically the COVID pandemic and the quarantine aspect that Joseph said, that would you actually be down here if we weren't stuck inside and like bored and whatnot? Would you really come down and support, or would you continue to ignore like you have for the past few years? And even before then, of course, just for decades. This summer, there were so many performative groups. Barack was also talking about how people from Rev Hall were bringing people across the bridge, just kind of directing them directly into harm's way. In addition, we're not thinking about how dangerous bridges are. We go across the bridge. There are so many bridges here. And in Chicago, Corey, I remember seeing the Chicago mayor wanted to raise them and block them.
Right.
Yeah. And so when we go over these bridges, we can get locked in there and they can just come and rush, which I wanted to say with that, the yellow t-shirts of the Wall of Moms, it was incredible at the beginning. It was amazing. But then it also turned into this thing with 501c4s and C3s and whatnot. And you should only be making those if you absolutely have to. I didn't want to have to make one, but it's Portland and I ended up having to put myself through that. You shouldn't be profiting off of that. Like so many people try to. Just because you're on the front page of the Washington Post doesn't mean that gives you a right to start taking resources from people and benefiting yourself from that. right? Like the media has just been, if it's a white person that's in a yellow t-shirt and you're on the front page, that's all people want to talk about, but they don't want to talk about the work that Black mothers are doing. I remember somebody saying that the WOM wasn't for specifically Black lives. It was for a multitude of other things.
All lives.
And right, like anti-capitalism, anti-racism, everything, anti-classism, all of that is in the Black Lives Matter movement, right? That's how we start to take down fascism. I'm getting like, the nonprofit industrial complex, as Barack is saying now, it's intense. Like, it just really hurts me to see like people had been betraying you all year, Teresa, just using your platform that you have worked so hard, you've put yourself in harm's way for so many people to protect people. And then the same people that say that they're fighting for Black lives want to go and profit off of an incredible Black organizer's work. Another thing that I wanted to mention about going down to the Justice Center and being water and everything, can we talk about the Indigenous Day of Rage that was organized by Black and Indigenous people?
Yes.
In addition to that, those day before, night before kind of actions, day of actions, a lot of people can't get down there. And then they think that it's going to be more successful because we do it last minute. Indigenous Day of Rage was promoted for weeks earlier. And personally, I feel that that was the most incredible action that we have done so far. I haven't been out on the ground for a long time now, but that really was so successful. And I wonder why, huh?
Because we organized within community, we did it together.
And I will say that night, the cops barely even found us. My partner, my partner was seriously inches away of just getting grabbed and thrown into a van. But I can't recall if this is completely correct, but there were pretty much no arrests, maybe a few. I can't totally remember, so I'm not gonna, stick to that. But it was incredible to see people actually putting in that work that we have been talking about, breaking it down. And then the next day, I saw white people that have huge platforms being like, I don't support people smashing the museums. And if you smash museum windows, then we're not friends and you're doing this wrong and all of this stuff. Museums aren't neutral, right, Teresa? That was your
part.
Like, what?
They have so much stolen property in them, and those communities took their property back.
Yes.
The fact that they tried to use the quilt at the Oregon Historical Society for our Black community, you give me my baby back. Give us back the stolen futures of our children that are being exploited in this community right now for your legislative corruption. Like, give me something tangible back. Give me back those Black futures that are right now incarcerated or displaced from their families. Don't talk to me about a blanket.
So with that being said, with the Portland Museum, what is it called? I'm sorry, I'm blanking out.
Portland Art Museum.
Portland Art Museum, yes. So they wanted to participate in the movement, and they offered me and a couple of photographers an online spot on their website to promote our work so they could do their part in ensuring that our voices are heard. And so I never knew they had a website that they had like galleries on. And so all they were offering was just a spot on their website just to put our work on there so they could see, like, say that they're part of the movement kind of thing like that. And like what you guys are saying right now is like, it makes sense because they do so much damage, and they don't even realize it. And so the fact that like they even try to give us like a little online spot, here you guys go, so that way we support you. It's just like it's like a slap in the face, And so I'm glad you guys are bringing this topic up because it's very important.
I just quickly want to say, and I always talk about like how stories are important, and you just said, Teresa, like everybody got pumped. Earlier before this, I was like feeling tired, but now I'm like, let's go. Let's fucking go. Let's go now. And I'm just thankful for all of you for sharing those stories. I'm pumped now, but now I'm like, let's get it.
It actually feels like a real spring break, right? It's like, wow, this is kind of cool. It's like last year's quarantine, but with activities every day. Barack?
I wanted to quickly say just the like all this talk about museums and all of that. Like, someone gave me this book the other day, and was put out by the Oregon Historical Society in 1974. And it's called The Truth About the Visible Empire Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And it is like essentially a Ku Klux Klan propaganda book put out by the Oregon Historical Society in the 70s. So like not that long ago. And it's got photos in it of like our mayor, our police chief, our sheriffs all standing with the Klan happily and kind of being like, you know, these people were just trying to protect American values. It's just like totally fucked. And it made me realize and think about the fact that like all of these museums exist, all like these historical societies really exist to perpetuate settler colonialism and like the myth of American exceptionalism. Because none of that stuff belongs to us. It's all stolen goods. Like I said in the chat, anyone who's trying to hit a lick on the Met Museum in New York, hit me up. I'm trying to get all that back. But it's all fully based on settler colonialism, whether you go to like the Louvre in France or the Met in New York or the Portland Art Museum. Often, you know, it's all settler colonialism, and it's all based on this false narrative of American exceptionalism, that we're like this amazing country and that we are entitled to this art and to these things that have nothing to do with us, and they're just completely stolen like our land. So
yeah, that also made me think about recently the Indianapolis Museum of Art. They were under fire because they issued a job posting where they actually asked in their description of who they were looking for. They're looking to maintain, they were seeking a director who would work to maintain its core white art audience, in addition to attracting a more diverse one. Like, these are things that you can't make up. So that recently happened. That was in February 13th, 2021. That's an actual job posting for a museum art director. You know, what you said, Barack, cannot ring more true. Like, that was during Black History Month. Come on now.
Oh, sorry. I just want to kind of like speak on what you were saying about the schools. So something that like is really important to me is because I'm becoming a teacher, and like I reminisce about like, not reminisce, but I kind of think back to when I was in elementary school and like how we were introduced to like American history, especially in Oregon, with the Oregon Trail games, and how like they kind of pitched this idea that these colonists and the Native Americans were friends at one point, and they do that. They play dress up. Like I remember doing this game. Like we would actually have like a platform where like students would kind of interact and act like this false story was actually true. We didn't learn about what happened really. We didn't learn about the genocide. We didn't learn about the sicknesses. We didn't learn about the killings and the rapings. We didn't learn about any of that. We learned that white people came here, settled, and they had Thanksgiving, and everything was kumbaya, and it was all fine. And when you get older and you realize it's like we were lied to growing up, our history books are all formed in white supremacy. So that way we kind of had this ideology that what we're seeing in the world is meant to be. And it's like, it's sick. And so that's like one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about teaching, is like, I want to eliminate those false facts in those books. Yeah. And I think by getting in the classroom is doing that, but also it's like, I'm up against a lot when it comes to that, because I have, you have parents that don't want their kids to learn about the real truth. You have school districts that will fight against you. And it's a scary topic, but it's like, it's something that has to be changed. And like, I mean, I'm willing to do that. So it's like, I'm glad everybody else here is doing like their part as well. And like, it takes a community, you know? And so like more conversations like this need to happen. And hopefully like one day we can just not have to have this conversation, you know? So, yeah.
That's what I was going to chime in about, is there are so many articles about the racist history of Portland in Oregon, but you need to really be careful of who you're taking, like who you're getting that information from. This is from the Willamette Weekly in 2017, and this is a disgusting title.
And they're racist anyway. They've always done that whole, you know.
That's why I'm not surprised by that. The Portland mayor in 1920s was a Klan member. The governor of Portland in the 1920s, Governor Pierce, and Mayor Bake was also a KKK member and was not wary of taking their endorsement. But yeah, just be careful of who you're getting this information from, and actually talk to Black and brown people. Don't use them as your Google search, but talk to them if they have any suggestions, and then get out there and find other things written by Black and brown people.
That is all the article. And it's crazy because So for the past, I want to say 6 months, I've gotten like freelance opportunities from Willam Weekly, and like seeing that as like a slap in the face, like, and it's like, damn, I spent like all this hard work, like taking pictures of like these different protests, or like sometimes like just anything they asked me to do, and like now I feel like it's almost like I'm lost, because like I just feel like I feel betrayed, because seeing that, like, how do you make a meme or like a mockery out of Oregon once being racist, and then going to hire me for different pictures and like cover photos for you. Yeah, so after seeing that, I won't be doing any kind of freelance work for them anymore, because that's insane.
Yeah, I wanted to just respond to what Joseph was saying, because like as an artist, I know how, like when someone offers you a platform like that, you want to hit on that platform, and you want to be seen, and you want to get paid for your work. And, so many people see them. But I almost think it's like, I totally understand, like, if, you don't want to do work through them, but maybe you could also think about this as a platform to build conversation. And I'm not saying to, like, feel like it's acceptable at all to do or to for their past actions. But I am kind of a really big, in my mind, I always want to say, okay, what can I do to help someone learn? Because when someone learns and someone changes, the only good can come from that. And again, I'm not saying that it's acceptable at all in any way. And this is knowledge I didn't know. I read the Willamette Weekly. I had no clue, but as an artist, I totally would see why you'd want to put your work through them, because, it's a good platform for work and for being seen. So I totally, because you're like, oh man, I feel like I wish I wouldn't have done that, but I could have done that. Just like with the museum, I didn't know anything about, I don't know enough about things sometimes to know better. And, like I dream of being in a museum. And I can't lie, if the Portland Museum hit me up and said, hey, we want to do a show, I would be inclined to want to do the show, because I want to show my art, on a huge platform.
But that's why we're having this conversation, because what we need to realize is that we don't have to show up in their capacity to educate white supremacists about their actions. They actually know what they're doing. And what I've learned in my 50 years of life is that, and through research, is that they do what they are able to get away with intentionally. It's very exploitive. And the more energy we spend on trying to redirect their actions rather than disenfranchising them by leaving them alone, like Joseph could literally say, I'm not fucking with Willamette Weekly anymore. And a lot of people will not bother them anymore. I won't buy ad space from them anymore. I don't have to participate in the Give Guide, but we have to make them be accountable to educating themselves, because we're tired. I've looked on the record, I do research, and for generation after generation, there have been people that are considered vulnerable, educating people that are privileged in all capacities. So we won't be doing that, hopefully, going forward. I hope that y'all take your education and your concern and your courage, and you start developing what we really need, which are the assets. Not anything that our forefathers left us, no assimilation needed. Declaration of Liberation. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I'll see y'all tomorrow when we go ahead and shut it down with art. You can't control art. I'm excited to see y'all tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. See y'all tomorrow.
Black power, y'all.
Black power.
Streets are streets. 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 Our streets. Our streets. Our streets. Our streets. Our streets. Our streets.
You guys haven't seen
Our streets.